Dracula Mihawk has a father. Probably a mother as well, but we're not as concerned with that. And on this episode of Man in a Dark Room Talks About Fictional Pirates, we are going to reveal who spawned the world's greatest swordsman. We're also going to be giving away an amazing One Piece gift, and this one is very, very cool. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam, and I like swords as well as the people who use them. And Mihawk is one of those. He's also just a fascinating character in general. A man who spends all of his time sailing alone on a dinghy, or alternatively a man who spends all of his time alone on a dank baboon-infested island. Not who you'd necessarily pick for the world's greatest swordsman on paper, but here he is. And there's something of an information drought regarding Mihawk, but Oda has left some striking clues along the way. So, who's your daddy? Well, in the case of Mr. Mihawk, we actually have two prime contenders, one of which is based on fictional genetics, and the other of which is based on fictional fashion. So we've got some strong and compelling evidence here. And to decide which one we start with, we are going to flip the Doflamingo. If he lands on his back, we'll do genetics, and if he lands on all fours, then we'll do fashion. All right, let's flip the flamingo. Would you look at that? He's landed on all fours like the good little doggy boy he is. So if you have a particularly keen eye, you may have noticed that Mihawk's standard outfit isn't exactly unique in the One Piece world. His classical garb is a very ornate coat with a floral paisley pattern on it, which is surprisingly hard to say. Floral paisley pattern, floral paisley platen, floral... Whatever the case, as wonderful as it is, this coat is not unique, and we've seen something very much like it from a certain Silver's Rayleigh. Whenever we get to experience the Dark King in any form of flashback, he is adorned with an extraordinarily similar coat. In fact, it's pretty much the exact same cut with the same erect rounded collar, but there are a couple of key differences. Firstly, while still being paisley-esque, the patterns are different, and also Rayleigh's incarnation does not feature the pattern on the arms of the coat. And of course, obviously, they're different colors, Mihawk sporting a very crimson red, whilst Rayleigh rocks the lavender lifestyle, a scheme which has been confirmed by Oda because Flashback Rayleigh appeared in color on the cover of Volume 96. Now, I'm usually not one to linger too heavily on aesthetic similarities, because in a series of well over 1,000 characters, sometimes two dudes are just going to be wearing the same thing, which is embarrassing because they should have called each other up and coordinated beforehand. However, in this particular case, the item of clothing in question is so oddly specific that even I have a hard time believing that it was just some sort of accident of design. At the very least, what we can confirm is that Mihawk and Rayleigh shop at the same high-end apparel store. That is the very least, and here is the very most. They could be father and son, hailing from the same fancy Grand Line Island, and therefore having access to the same general fashion of the island. Because fashion in One Piece doesn't evolve as quickly as it does in the real world, if at all, island societies tend to have their gimmick and they stick to it, mostly for story reasons, so that we as readers are confused as little as possible when traveling back and forth through time. Now, there is another explanation for the jacket, which is pretty wow-inducing. But first, let's see if we can make this work. It is admittedly a bit outlandish to connect two characters who have literally never interacted in the series before, not in front of us anyway. But Rayleigh is a man of 78 years, whilst Mihawk is a mighty middle-aged 43, which is slightly older than I thought he was, but yeah, that works. In terms of a timeline, this may be a bit awkward though, because we know that the God Valley incident occurred 38 years ago, meaning that Mihawk would have already been a 5-year-old at the time. So Rayleigh would have had to have planted his Ray seed at some stage whilst he was a member of the Roger Pirates. And as for the question of the seed bearer, Shaki is a pretty immediate contender for motherhood, simply due to her intimate association with Rayleigh. But also Shaki has similar hair to Mihawk. You see how they both have those spiky protrusions on either side of their faces? Yes, it's similar. This is where we get a bit though, because we are now like 3 layers deep into wild speculation. Mihawk and Rayleigh have a connection because of their outfits. That connection therefore implies parentage, and that parentage is also Shaki because she's associated with Rayleigh, who is associated to the paisley pattern, which is associated with Mihawk. Theories spiral out of control very quickly, so we've got to ground this before we go too wild. So let's give away a gift, because for this holiday month, we are showering presents to random subscribers. And today's gift is, well, let's be honest, it's a lot. It is an entire goodie bag, and even entire goodie stuff not in the bag, of One Piece stuff. There's a wallet, a bunch of cool promo stuff, a delightful Frankie necklace in a box, and literally an entire plastic bag of keychains, featuring all of your favorite characters like Zoro and not Zoro. And all of this comes courtesy of Dawn of the World, who generously donated it. Go check her out, she does funny, dry Australian One Piece content similar to me, but not me. But if you'd like to win this bag of stuff, then you just need to do two things. Firstly, subscribe to the channel, and secondly, leave a comment answering the following question. Who would win in a fight, Drakeul Mihawk or Edward Meevil? And that is legit it. They keep falling. The winner will be announced in our community section, so go ahead, do the thing, and win the goodie bag. But let's get back to coats. Because as mentioned earlier, family ties are not the only explanation for these aesthetic similarities. And for an outside example, let's take Luffy, Shanks, and Roger. All three of them wore the exact same straw hat, but none of them are related by blood. This icon of fashion is more of a symbol of inherited will, as are many of Oda's designs. A more recent one would be Kozuki Oden and Yamato, no last name, Yamato Kaido-san. But Yamato also wears the defining piece of Oden's design, which is the white and purple Neodaisuke, aka the mighty thick decorative rope. It doesn't really matter what it is, what matters is that it's a symbol of inherited will or legacy. And this happens everywhere in One Piece. Oda goes to such great lengths to include these small features that often completely fly over most of our heads. So in regards to the coat, sure, there is still a connection between Mihawk and Rayleigh, but it doesn't necessarily need to be blood-based. And here's an introductory question to this. Who was the world's greatest swordsman before Mihawk? It's a weird thought because for the past quarter of a century of real world time, Mihawk has been our series constant. He's like some sort of sword deity. He's just always been there. Lord of the Sword, if you will. However, due to only having existed for a minuscule 43 fictional years, there must have been a former Sword Lord. And I would propose that the former Lord of the Sword was none other than Silver's Rayleigh, because even though it's primarily shrouded in mystery, we do know that Rayleigh is nothing short of a genius with a blade. In fact, he's used at least 3 different types of swords over the course of the series, and was even seen dual wielding in Oden's flashback. And perhaps this paisley coat is part of becoming the world's greatest swordsman, like an aesthetic that is passed on from one swordsman to another, because Rayleigh didn't always dress quite this sharply. In fact, the one image we have of his more comparatively youthful self has him in more of a slobby shirt covered in 5-leaf clovers. So at some stage, Rayleigh gained a sense of fashion, and then at another stage, he also abandoned it. Interestingly, the coat seems to only be present on both Rayleigh and Mihawk in their prime, because Mihawk was 19 at the time of Roger's execution, and whilst he did have his blade Yoru, his trademark paisley coat is nowhere to be seen. And fun fact about this, 19 is the same age that Zoro was when he met Luffy and began his sword-based journey. So at the time of Roger's execution, it is highly unlikely that Mihawk held the title. If anything, he was in more of a Zoro-style situation of being a complete rookie. So from here, Mihawk journeys the world, continuing to build personal power, eventually finding and defeating the then world's greatest swordsman, at which point Mihawk adopts the coat, which happens to coincide with the era where Rayleigh stopped wearing the paisley coat. And let's think of this in the aforementioned straw hat example. That hat was a symbol that was passed down between at least 3 generations, Roger to Shanks, Shanks to Luffy. And in the case of this coat, it would be very similar, passed down through 3 generations, from Rayleigh to Mihawk, then Mihawk to Zoro. And I know I'm spending a lot of time analyzing the ramifications of fictional fabric, but just stay with me. The coat, much as it is implied with the straw hat, may hold a much more traditional meaning. Like perhaps 1,000 years ago when communication was primitive, the only way that one could distinguish the world's greatest swordsman was via this symbol, so that all of the other sword-crazed maniacs immediately knew who to challenge. And again, much like the straw hat, this meaning may have been forgotten over time, but the symbol persisted nonetheless. In which case, I'm very much looking forward to Zoro eventually donning a similar piece of clothing, even if it does clash with his more, how shall we put this, basic fashion sense. I mean, I can't talk. All I ever do is wear a black t-shirt with some sort of crap on it. It could also be none of what I've just said. In reality, perhaps Mihawk saw Rayleigh walking down the street one day and went, oh snap, that's one stylish mofo. So he artfully stole the design to raise his own personal branding. That's how it would work in the real world, but we do need to remember that One Piece is not that. The One Piece world also has a distinct swordsman deficit. There's a billion different characters going for the Pirate King title, but I swear that Zoro is the only person in the world who cares about being the world's greatest swordsman. Not even Mihawk cares because he already is. In terms of Rayleigh's background though, it would be beautifully symbolic. If Roger, the original Pirate King, had Rayleigh, the world's greatest swordsman, by his side, because we could look back on Luffy's words in chapter 6, the world's greatest swordsman. That's great. And it's fitting since your new boss is going to be king of the pirates. Anything else would make me look bad, because it would be almost foreshadowing Rayleigh, and I don't know if it's it's possible to foreshadow the past, but I guess if the past is in the future of the fictional story, then it is. But with Luffy having the subconscious intuition of everything he needs and that everything Roger used to become the Pirate King. But this also extends to meeting Mihawk at Baratier. He sees two young whippersnappers, one of which wants to be the world's greatest swordsman, and the other wants to be the Pirate King, making him go, that's a thing that's already happened. Obviously remembering who Rayleigh was, and then Mihawk goes on to quite literally state, they make a good team. And this is dangerous because the more I think about it, the more I like it. The idea that Zoro follows the same sort of generational path that Luffy does, and it even works out perfectly with the middle generation being Shanks and Mihawk, two friendly rivals. But before I mention genetics, and there is a reason why I chose to flip the Doflamingo. And he is the perfect blend of Mihawk's parentage options, as he is both highly fashionable and a world noble. A former one anyway, I guess now he's more of a glorified pink charlatan, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention the very obvious idea, which is that Mihawk is the son of or is in some way related to Eam. And this pretty much just comes down to eyes. Mihawk and Eam are two rare characters in this world who share this incredibly unique eye design. And if we can jump to parenting conclusions based on a paisley jacket, then we can certainly do the same with eyes. This one is more difficult in general to argue because Eam is such a stupidly large mystery, but there's some potential here beyond just eyes. Like the idea that Mihawk is a warlord, and weirdly enough, he's the only warlord who we have no idea why he joined the system. As an example, with Doflamingo, he blackmailed the world government for the position. Boa Hancock did it to protect the Kuja tribe, Jinbei did it to help foster human-fishman relations, Kuma was likely forced to become a warlord, and Crocodile wanted to take advantage of his position to find Pluton, and so on and so forth. But why did Mihawk join? I mean, maybe he just got tired of being chased by men in white coats, but another answer could be simple nepotism. As the spawn of Eam, the Five Elder Stars may have been willing to grant him special amnesty to be a professional nuisance maker. And as a companion to this, I highly recommend you check out another video I have on immortality in One Piece, because it covers the phenomenon of this eye, as well as how it isn't just restricted to Mihawk and Eam. Zunesha is another notable creature with this eye design, and it could very well be implying, tried to put the word eye in implying, I don't know if it worked, but it could be implying something far more sinister than an awkward family tree. So watch that video here because there's always more to learn, explore, and experience with this wonderful series, so I look forward to seeing you there.